U.S. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson is on his first official visit to Asia as U.S.'s top diplomat. Who is he and what could he bring to the job? And as the Syrian crisis enters its 7th year, what is China's position on the crisis? I talked with China's Syria envoy. Welcome to The Point. I'm Li Xin. As the U.S. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson sets out on his first official visit to Asia since his confirmation as Donald Trump's top diplomat, expectations have been mixed. Not only did Tillerson receive the most opposition of any secretary in the past 50 years for his confirmation vote, his nominee for Deputy Secretary of State was also denied by Donald Trump. To some, this is a sign that it will be difficult for Tillerson to do his job in the following 4 years, and his low public profile has led to speculation that he doesn't have a voice in Washington, or at least doesn't have a strong voice. So is the former CEO up to the job of Secretary of State, and how will he shape the relationship between U.S. and countries here in Northeast Asia? For more insight, I'm first joined by Dr. Zach Cooper, a fellow with the Japan Chair at the Center for Strategic and International Studies. But before we start the discussion, let's take a look at this package first.
Rex Wayne Tillerson is the 69th and current United States Secretary of State, serving since February the 1st this year. Tillerson earned a Bachelor of Science in Civil Engineering at the University of Texas in Austin before joining the Exxon company as a production engineer in 1975. He rose to serve as the chairman and CEO of the company from 2006 to 2016. In 2014, Tillerson, who had made business deals on behalf of Exxon with Russian President Vladimir Putin, opposed the sanctions against Russia. He was previously the director of the joint US-Russian oil company Exxon Neftegas. Tillerson is 64 years old and has no formal foreign policy experience, but has built close relationships with many world leaders by closing massive deals across Eurasia and the Middle East on behalf of the world's largest energy company.
So who is this CEO turned diplomat, and what will he bring to U.S.'s foreign policy? Here is Dr. Cooper joining us from Stanford. Thank you very much for joining us. First of all, I understand that you have an in-person conversation with Rex Tillerson about policy. What was your impression about him, his way of talking, of engaging people? What was his style? What is his style?
Well, I think although he's not well known to the public, he comes off as an incredibly impressive person, lots of gravitas, as we would say in English, that he's very serious. He has deep moral beliefs that come from his time leading the Boy Scouts in part. So I was very impressed with him.
Mm-hmm. Now, one of the reasons why people were opposed to his nomination was that he never had any government background. So is that the reason why the Congress gave him so much votes of opposition during the nomination vote? And how is that going to potentially hinder his job as the top diplomat in your eyes?
I think working with Congress is going to be incredible for Secretary Tillerson. There's no question that there was opposition. I think some of that is due to the opposition in Congress to the Trump administration. Some of it was due to a perception that he might be less tough on Russia than many of the Republicans would want. I actually think what he said in his confirmation hearing was fairly reassuring on most of these foreign policy issues. The one area where he got pushed a bit is on detail, that Congress wanted more detail on some issues, and I think Secretary Tillerson's view was that he didn't want to get out in front of his policymaking staff before he got into office, and so he was a bit reticent. But my guess is that as the next few months, over the next few months, he will become more active and work pretty carefully with Congress to push on a couple of high priority issues.
Let's again, before we talk of his potential policies, the constraints that he's suffering at this moment. For instance, a number of staff have resigned, and there is talk of a cutting of 30% budget. And this time, it is understood that he's not going to be followed by a huge press entourage, which is normally the case when the Secretary of State travels. So, how much clout, in your eyes, do you think he has in really shaping the U.S.'s foreign policy?
I don't think we know the answer yet. What's most important often for a Secretary of State is what they do outside, what they do publicly, but also what they do inside and how much influence they have with the President, with the rest of the National Security Council. My guess is that he's going to be very influential on issues that he cares about within the National Security Council, that he's going to be a fairly large presence inside the government. But I think much of the debate about Secretary Tillerson thus far has been focused on the lack of public attention. So he hasn't come out and made any major press statements. This concern that because he's not bringing press on the trip to Asia, that he might be less interested in engaging with the press. My guess is that this comes from two concerns on Secretary Tillerson's part. One, that he doesn't want to be seen as making policy before the policies are finished. So there's a North Korea policy review underway, for example, and I think therefore he's a little bit hesitant to come out openly and talk about what North Korea policy he would pursue. And then the second issue is just that his background as a businessman tends to be about doing deals, right? Making deals with leaders which didn't require public support. And so I think he's going to have to take a little bit of time to get used to engaging the public as Secretary of State.
But that is really a huge departure from the kind of normal accepted practice of the top diplomat of the United States government. I mean, people basically want to hear on a daily basis what they're doing and where the progress is. You know, even if you're just drafting your policy, you might need to come out and tell the public that this is what you're doing, right? But he's not doing that at all. How do you think this is going to affect the kind of standing he's going to have in the public, in the eyes of the journalists, and in the inside circle of Washington?
I think you're right that it should be a major concern. Part of the challenge for him is that the administration has very few appointees in place. And so even if he wanted to come out and have very substantive conversations with the press, until he has a strong team in place under him at the State Department, I think it's going to be tough. So that just puts more pressure on the administration to start naming the political appointees they want to put at the State Department and elsewhere to try and get those people confirmed, and then to move on to policy issues as quickly as they can.
Yeah, well, he is on the policy issue right now in Northeast Asia, and this is no easy task, a big thing to run into on his first foreign trip, right? I mean, we have this tension on the Korean Peninsula where the U.S. has deployed the THAAD system in the ROK, and China is opposing that. Meanwhile, China and the United States will have to have a healthy relationship because we are the biggest economies in the world. How do you think he's going to balance that?
That's right. I think North Korea is going to be the main focus of this trip for him. There's no question that there's instability on the peninsula. I think it starts with the North Korean development of its nuclear and missile programs, but certainly the upcoming elections in South Korea are going to be a big issue, and THAAD with its deployment and the debate about its employment in Seoul is going to be important as well. So my guess is that what he's hoping for is to gain more cooperation from South Korea, from Japan, and from China on how to approach the North Korea challenge and slow down its procurement of nuclear weapons and ballistic missiles.
We're going to keep a close eye on the development. Dr. Zach Cooper joining us from Stanford. And you have been watching The Point here on CGTN. I'll be back right after this short break for more discussion on Rex Tillerson, the U.S. top diplomat. So welcome back. I'm joined in the studio by Mr. Fan Ji-she, Director at the Institute of American Studies at the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences. Mr. Fan, thank you for joining us. Now, What do we know? What do people in China know about Mr. Tillerson? What do we think of him, especially his style of conducting business?
At this moment, we do not know much about Mr. Tillerson or Secretary Tillerson, other than those media coverage in the United States. But we need to wait for a while until the dust gets settled down. What kind of style, as a leading voice in the foreign policy in Trump administration, and what kind of role he's going to play in decision-making process. Mr. Trump does not have a routine way in governing, and there are many voices in foreign policy. First thing first, his Twitter usually lay down some policy preferences. Then his team is going to walk some of his points back, or just to put forward.
Yeah.
And the other part is that in Asia policy, as we can see, the Secretary of Defense play an important role. The first trip to Asia was made by General Mattis.
Yeah, you actually bringing to my second question is, who is drafting the U.S.'s foreign policy at this moment? As you said, Donald Trump is tweeting things from time to time. Of course, Donald Trump will be setting the most important principles, but there is also Kushner, who is dealing with the Middle East issue. There is also Steve Bannon, who is giving very strong opinion about the foreign policy issue. And the important thing is, it is reported that Rex Tillerson is often not in the room when daily briefing is taking place involving the president on important issues. So what position does Rex Tillerson at this moment hold in Washington, in the power circle in Washington?
I believe that's a question for those observers that are pondering worldwide. Who is the leading voice and who has a final say in foreign policy issues? And as you mentioned just now, that Jared Kushner, Steve Bannon are very important voices in this process. And also, the new National Security Advisor, McMaster, he's going to organize a new team when the General Flynn left. So people see that it's pretty such a mess in Washington, D.C., if not messier. And we can find out some traditional voices like James Mattis, and maybe McMaster is going to be some traditional style. But as to President Trump, what kind of leading style? That'll be an interesting thing to see. Whether he will play the role of a CEO, just ask other people to do what he wants them to do, or just, inside the White House and within different departments, people will fight against each other to compete for influence.
Although we are not sure about Rex Tillerson's actual influence and capacity in drafting U.S.'s foreign policy and admitting it, we have to deal with him, right? He is coming to China, and Chinese President Donald Trump is expected to meet Chinese President Xi is expected to meet his U.S. counterpart in the United States in the early April. So how can China deal with somebody whom we don't know much at this moment from the Chinese way? How do you how do you see the Chinese diplomats preparing for this meeting?
I think Secretary Tillerson is a delegate of the President Trump. And whether he has governmental experience or not, whether he has his own voice or not, he will be the leading voice at this moment for the Trump administration. So I think this trip to Asia will be very important. He will stop in Japan, in South Korea, and will come to Beijing. And what kind of message he is going to delay, and what kind of concern he is going to address, that will define what kind of person he is going to be, and how he will handle those foreign policy issues in East Asia.
Now, this very important press conference that the U.S.'s State Department official has given about Tillerson's visit, during which it was said that his visit seeks to work collaboratively to the maximum extent possible with important partners like China, and they're going to seek result-oriented engagement with China. That's something I haven't heard before, right? Result-oriented. What does that say about the kind of approach Tillerson might employ in dealing with China?
Many people have said that, and including Secretary Tillerson, that They want to get things done. They want to see the result. And it seems to me they are in a hurry to get many things done. But obviously, either regional issues or bilateral issues, it's not easy to get things done overnight. It takes time. So that's a process for them to interact with the player in this region. So it takes a while to see whether he can get things done or he cannot. And I think it's still not the time to conclude.
Yeah, what will you be watching during his three-nation tour? The most important message you'll be taking away?
The most important message is what he will see. In Japan.
On which subject? Because we have multiple subjects on the list, right? Trade relationship, thought, the U.S.'s alliances with Japan, the U.S.'s alliance with South Korea. Which one do you think you will be paying the most attention to?
I think the most important thing at this moment will be twofold. The first one is the DPRK, nuclear issue is getting a big topic now at this moment. And the other one, certainly, as recently the White House has announced, President Trump and President Xi is going to meet in early April. So that will be the key topic when he come to Beijing.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fan Ji-she, Director at the Institute of American Studies at the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences. Now, here's my point. Some people are saying that Tillerson is focused on the long game and that he is camera shy, but during his first visit to Asia, he has to represent the face of U.S. foreign policy under the spotlight, and there is no time for the luxury of playing the long game. Given the kind of tensions there are in this part of the world, people are looking for clear signals. How the CEO turned diplomat will shape America's policy in Northeast Asia will be critical for America's interest in the future. Hopefully, his pragmatism can achieve the balance needed between America's ties with its allies and also with the rising China. You're watching The Point. We'll be back right after this. The Syrian crisis is entering its 7th year with no clear vision yet on a political solution. According to the United Nations, over 400,000 people have been killed or gone missing in the war, and half of the country's population have been displaced. Throughout the last 6 years, world powers have hosted countless meetings on Syria, with everyone agreeing that a political solution is the only way out of the impasse, although what they do under the table is not clear. So what else can the international community do to reduce tensions in Syria, and what role did and will China play? Here's part of an exclusive interview I had with China's Special Envoy on Syria, Xie Xiaoyan, while he was in Geneva, Switzerland for the last round of the Syria peace talks. He began by telling me about China's position on the issue and the future of Syrian President Bashar al-Assad.
We are a member of the P5 of the UN Security Council, and as such, it is our responsibility to push forward for peace and stability and the political settlement in Syria. But for my own job as a special envoy of the Chinese government for the Syrian issue, since I took up the job last April, I've been traveling around in the region, in the Middle East, and I have visited about a dozen countries here. I've also visited Russia and the United States, meeting with officials, government officials, and people from, shall I say, research institutions and think tanks. And I've also attended the Geneva peace talks, and through these contacts, not only I personally have got some more information and clearer understanding of the situation in Syria, but also have the opportunity to exchange views with my counterparts in the foreign ministries of, say, the regional countries, the United States and Russia. But also I have the opportunity to explain China's position, what we have done, what we're going to do to help, to lend a helping hand in bringing about peace and stability and the political settlement in Syria. And I think from my discussions and the contacts with these people, I have the impression that China's role in the whole Syrian issue is very much welcome. They say that China has been playing a very active, very productive and constructive role in we have some special advantages.
Mm-hmm. What are the special? Yes, I'm very interested. I'm very interested in finding out what are the special advantages that China holds. We know that China is the only country among the 5 permanent members of the UN Security Council that is not militarily involved in the Syria crisis. On top of that, what other special advantages does China have that you see, or China sees a potential greater constructive role that China can play in solving the Syria crisis?
I think, as I said, that we do have access to contacts with different parties in the conflict, both from the government side and also from the opposition groups. This is, I think, what I will call an advantage that some other countries don't enjoy. We also have wide range of contacts with both the United States and Russia, as these are the 2 major players in the conflict outside the region. But also we do have contacts with the regional countries. I visited Saudi Arabia, Qatar, UAE, Turkey, Iran. You know, these the kind of contacts that some countries don't have them all. They may have access to one side of the group, but not the other side. We have access to both sides from different groups. This is in itself, I think, an advantage. But also, I think China is a country that takes a position that is welcome by both sides. We're not involved militarily, but we do contribute to the 4 major issues. They are the political settlement, ceasefire, fight against terrorism, and humanitarian relief.
Now, some Western media has accused China of not doing enough, for instance, in helping the refugees. What is your reaction to this kind of accusation?
We've been trying our best within our command and our capacity to provide humanitarian relief work. And so far, we have provided humanitarian assistance in the amount of 480 million RMB, including cash, food, shelter, medical equipment, medicine. Remember, you have to remember that China is still a developing country. Per capita terms, China's economy, our per capita GDP still ranks about 80th place or something. But even having said that, China has been trying its best to provide humanitarian assistance. Just recently, Chinese President Xi Jinping announced China will provide another 200 million RMB for the relief work for the refugees in Syria. We'll continue as China is as I said, China is a responsible country, big country that we ought to fulfill our international responsibilities, but that should be done in accordance with our capacity within our command.
Let me also ask you this question. Now, some Western media reports have said that China has a stake in resolving the Syrian crisis because there are some 5,000 radicalized fighters that are fighting in Syria that have originated from the western regions of China. Is that the reason that China has increased its involvement in resolving the Syrian crisis? Or one of the reasons?
This is one of the reasons that China is actively participating in in trying to find a solution for the Syrian crisis, because some of the terrorists, indeed, from China. But I would also like to say this: that the fight against terrorism is everybody's responsibility, because terrorism is the common enemy of the world. Just look at the horrible attacks on civilians in Paris, in London, in Berlin, in Europe, in Ankara, in other places in the Middle East, in Africa, in Asia. These terrorist attacks need to be stopped, and the terrorists need to be dealt with, need to be defeated. It is the responsibility of every country in the world. It is the responsibility of the international community. And China can only contribute to the joint efforts of the world, of the international community.
Former U.S. Congressman Ron Paul has said in a recent article that it is the U.S. obstruction in Syria that kept the war going for 6 long years. He argued non-intervention in the affairs of another country does not damage U.S. credibility overseas. Rather, it is U.S. meddling, bombing, droning, and regime changing that damages credibility. In contrast, China's position has always been urging a political dialogue and to let the people of that country decide their own fate. People might think of this as a cliche, but in the end, this can be the only way forward. That's all for this edition of The Point. As usual, follow me on Facebook and Twitter using the handle The Point with LX, and you can watch our previous shows on the CGTN channel of YouTube. Click on the playlist and look for The Point with Liu Xin. Thanks for watching. I'll see you tomorrow at the same time.